Marissa Caldwell wasn't supposed to be the hero. She wasn't meant to change the course of a $1 billion deal. In fact, she wasn't even supposed to speak. On the bitterly cold morning of January 18th, Marissa arrived at the towering glass and steel structure of Drake Towers, 30 minutes before anyone else. Snow swirled in the air like tiny shards of glass, the streets glistening under the pale glow of city lights. Her breath formed ghostly clouds as she pulled her coat tighter and entered the lobby. A junior legal analyst, she wasn't listed on the formal invite for the final negotiation meeting, but Angela Keene, senior legal counsel, had sent her a last-minute email. "If you're free, sit in. Might be good experience." "Might be good experience" had become the unofficial motto of Marissa's career. From being told to listen in on depositions she'd prepared entirely by herself, to watching interns from Ivy League schools get the praise she earned, Marissa had learned that excellence only took you so far when you didn't fit the room. She walked into the boardroom just before sunrise. The table was a massive, shining slab of walnut, cold and imposing under the dim, recessed lighting. On each seat sat a neatly stacked copy of the final contract, a 4-inch thick binder filled with the most sterile, deceptive words money could buy. She pulled her binder closer and sat at the farthest end of the table. The room filled slowly. The big players arrived in waves. Preston Elliott, the CEO, with his dazzling smile and effortless charm. Mark Evans, the arrogant VP of Finance, with a reputation for cutting corners. Angela, sharp-eyed and poised, and a cast of suited men and women who barely looked at her as they passed. Preston dominated the space from the moment he walked in. Everything about him was a performance. His stride, his laughter, the way he handed off his coat without breaking eye contact with the person he was charming. He had the kind of confidence that comes not from knowledge, but from being told every day of your life that you're the smartest person in the room. "Big day," he beamed as he took his place at the head of the table. "Let's bring this baby home," Mark Evans chimed in, tapping the screen to bring up the slide deck titled Digital Core Acquisition, Final Sign-Off. Angela leaned toward Marissa and whispered, "Just observe. Don't speak unless asked." Marissa nodded, silently flipping to the pages she had spent the previous night poring over. She hadn't slept. She couldn't. Something about the latest revisions gnawed at her, so she'd made coffee at midnight and laid out every version of the agreement on her apartment floor. Draft 3 versus Draft 5. Line by line, clause by clause, it was buried in the back. Clause 11.3, one sentence that didn't appear in the previous version. Purchaser shall assume any and all undisclosed liabilities, including but not limited to pending litigation, civil penalties, or unresolved contractual debts, whether known prior to closing or not. 27 words. Words that sounded harmless. Words that could destroy the company. The meeting opened with routine updates. Mark ran through due diligence results, Angela reviewed legal vetting, and Preston waxed poetic about new frontiers and legacy milestones. Everyone was smiling, everyone except Marissa. She glanced around. No one had flagged Clause 11.3. No one had even mentioned it. She watched as Preston picked up the ceremonial pen, the one they used for big deals, the one with the engraved logo and the velvet box. He clicked it open, and that's when she heard her own voice, soft but firm. "Excuse me." The room didn't hear it, so she said it again, louder, sharper. "Excuse me, but this clause is a trap." It was as if someone had pulled the plug on the room. Preston froze. The pen hovered in his hand. "What did you say?" he asked, not angry yet, but amused, like someone humoring a child. Marissa stood. She didn't want to. Her knees were trembling, but her voice was calm. Clause 11.3. It indemnifies the seller from any undisclosed liabilities, no matter how damaging they are. That includes things we didn't and couldn't have known about. If we sign this as is, we could inherit millions in debt, unresolved lawsuits, or regulatory fines. Mark scoffed. "That's boilerplate. Come on. We've read through this 100 times. "Not like this," Marissa said. "That sentence didn't exist in the previous version. It was added in the 5th draft, late Friday night. The metadata shows it was inserted around 11:47 p.m. with a cross-reference to Section 7.2. But 7.2 doesn't mention pending litigation, only supplier contracts. Angela's head turned sharply. "Show me." Marissa slid her binder across the table. Angela flipped through it, frowning deeper with each page. "Oh my God," Angela whispered. She turned to Preston. "She's right. This clause changes the entire liability framework." Preston stood up. "Why didn't anyone catch this?" Mark's face turned red. "That was scrubbed in version control. The cross-reference made it look like a standard update." "But it wasn't," Marissa said. "It was a trap. And if we sign it, it becomes our trap." The silence that followed felt like thunder. Preston looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. Then he said flatly, "Stop everything. Nobody signs anything. I want legal to review this immediately. Everyone take a break." 20 minutes. People rose, murmuring, avoiding her eyes. Some glared. Others looked confused. Preston left last, closing the door behind him. Angela stayed. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" Marissa looked up. "I kept us from walking into a minefield." Angela exhaled. "And probably made enemies in this room for life." "That was going to happen eventually anyway." Angela tilted her head. "Where did you learn to read like that?" Marissa shrugged. "Cincinnati law. 3rd year. I found a similar clause buried in an employment dispute settlement. Cost the firm $7 million. "Let me guess," Angela said. "You flagged it. Your name was removed. Someone else got the credit." Marissa didn't answer. She didn't need to. Angela nodded. "Well, they're not going to forget your name after today." Marissa sat back down, alone once more. She stared at the conference table, still strewn with untouched copies of the agreement. The deal wasn't dead, not yet, but it had changed. So had she. The air in the conference room had shifted. What started as a celebration of signatures and projections had turned cold, brittle, like the glass windows rimmed with frost that overlooked the Minneapolis skyline. And in the center of it all stood Marissa Langford, still seated, still calm, but now unmistakably seen. Rodrigo from Strategic Ops was now squinting at his tablet like it had just betrayed him. Brittany from Communications kept her eyes trained on the table, as though eye contact would somehow make the moment worse. Mark Eisen's confidence had wilted by degrees, like a balloon with a slow leak. But Preston Velman, the CEO, he was the one who mattered. He hadn't left the room yet, but something in his presence had already receded. Marissa hadn't meant to stop a billion-dollar deal. She hadn't come into that room thinking she'd walk out as anything more than a footnote on a meeting invite. But now she had a room full of power brokers biting their tongues or sharpening them. She took a slow sip of water from her metal flask. Her hands didn't shake. Not anymore. Flashback. 2 nights ago. It had been close to midnight when Marissa had finally opened the latest draft of the acquisition contract. It had come in late, as they always do, with the subject line final review.pdf, as if that made it trustworthy. She almost left it until morning. Almost. But something gnawed at her. The acquisition had moved too fast. Too smooth. Red flags never wave like banners. They slither beneath the surface. And this one, the sudden urgency, the overconfidence in leadership's tone, it all reeked of something that needed to be found. She pulled up version 3 of the draft, then version 5, compared them side by side, highlighted every sentence that felt massaged. And there it was. Clause 11.3, hidden in a cross-reference paragraph buried under indemnity language, padded with legalese. It was a sentence. Just 27 words. But those words could shift hundreds of millions in liability. She didn't sleep. By 4 a.m., she'd cross-checked legal precedents, pulled similar cases, and highlighted every possible exposure. She flagged it, marked it, and printed it out. She placed the document on top of her bag, where it would stay until the meeting, not to make a scene, just in case no one else had caught it. Turns out no one had. Back in the boardroom. Angela from legal had finally leaned in. Her normally pristine expression wavered. "Let me see the page," she asked quietly. Marissa slid it over. Preston's fingers still hovered above the signature line, frozen in a posture that now looked foolish. You're saying this clause could hold us accountable for anything they chose not to disclose? Preston asked, his voice measured, but his eyes sharp. Marissa nodded. Even things that haven't yet materialized, pending lawsuits, undisclosed debt, settlements in progress. The way this is worded, we inherit everything once we sign. Couldn't that be standard? Mark Eisen tried to recover. Sometimes indemnity language reads aggressive, but it's not standard, Marissa interrupted gently but firmly. It's a trap clause. It reads like a catch-all, but it's deliberately vague where it should be precise. The third-party liability language, it ties back to us, not them. Even if they've buried a financial landmine, we're the ones who'll step on it. Mark scoffed again, this time trying to save face. It's one interpretation. No, Angela said, scanning the paper. It's the interpretation. She's right. A silence fell so absolute it seemed to flatten the room. Preston's mouth pressed into a line. His eyes didn't blink. The man built on charm and speed had met the immovable force of someone who actually read the fine print and understood it. He straightened. No one signs anything, he said at last. I want a full legal breakdown, right now. Angela, walk it with me. He pushed from the table, nodding for Angela to follow. Others stood too, some grateful for the pause, others visibly frustrated. Phones came out, excuses about urgent calls. A few went straight to the window and whispered to each other like students after a surprise pop quiz. Marissa stayed seated. She looked straight ahead, heart calm, but mind already 10 steps ahead. She had known stepping into that meeting that she was a seat filler, a legal assistant invited for due diligence theater. But now she was a disruptor. Angela, leaving the room, passed her with a short whisper. You've just painted a bullseye on your back, she said, almost not unkindly. Marissa didn't flinch. I had one when I walked in. Aftermath, 20 minutes later. When Preston returned, his tone was sharper. Angela trailed behind with a bundle of annotated pages. No one joked. No one smiled. We're redlining the clause, Preston announced. We don't sign until this is revised, and I want a double review on every indemnity reference in this draft. He glanced at Marissa but said nothing more. But others did. As the meeting adjourned, Rodrigo threw her a smirk. Nice stunt, he said under his breath. Won't get you far. Brittany avoided her entirely. Mark, of course, couldn't help himself. As they filed out, he lingered. You've been here, what, 6 months? He said. You're not even senior counsel. What gives you the right to derail a closing? Marissa stood slowly, collected her things, and looked him directly in the eye. I didn't derail anything. I protected it. She walked past him, spine straight. Later at the break room, the coffee tasted like wet cardboard, but the silence tasted worse. That's when the voice came. I wouldn't have caught it either. Marissa turned. It was Brittany, now softer, more honest. I read that clause 3 times and didn't see it. But when you said it out loud, damn. Marissa let the words settle. It's written to sound harmless, she said. That's the trick. Brittany nodded. You may have saved us from eating a disaster. Or bought myself a target, Marissa replied, not bitter, just aware. Brittany was quiet. Then she said, well, I'd rather have someone like you on my team than Mark Eisen in a $1,000 suit. Marissa almost smiled. Almost. Marissa hadn't made it back to her desk when Preston's assistant appeared like a shadow. He'd like a word, she said, tone unreadable. Marissa nodded and followed. The executive corridor was quieter than the rest of the floor, insulated by glass, prestige, and expensive carpeting. Preston's office door was open just enough to make entering feel intentional, not invited. He stood by the window, arms crossed, back to the room. Marissa stepped inside. You caught everyone off guard, he said, still facing the skyline. I wasn't trying to, she replied. He finally turned, eyes steady. Sit. She did, folding her hands in her lap. Her posture wasn't confrontational, but it wasn't deferential either. Preston took his time moving behind his desk. He didn't sit. My legal team confirmed your interpretation, he said. Marissa nodded. I thought they might. No thanks to Angela, he added flatly. She missed it. So did Eisen. So did everyone else in that room. Except you. It's my job to read what others skip. Preston tilted his head slightly. Is it? Your title doesn't suggest that level of review. Marissa's voice stayed even. Then maybe your titles need rethinking. He let out a low breath, somewhere between a scoff and a laugh. Then he sat. I've been in this business 20 years, he began. Closed deals in Tokyo and Frankfurt, in Sao Paulo. Seen people rise and fall because they didn't read the footnotes. And yet, she interrupted gently, you almost signed one of them. Preston didn't flinch, but his smile thinned. Tell me, Marissa, he said, steepling his fingers. What do you want? It wasn't a challenge. It was curiosity, genuine curiosity. The kind that comes from a man who realizes he just misjudged someone in his own war room. Marissa didn't answer right away. I want what I've earned, she said. Respect, recognition, and a seat at the table where it matters, not in the back with the note-takers. Preston leaned forward. You think this earns you that? I think saving the company from an undisclosed $100 million lawsuit buys me the right to ask. Another pause. I'm offering you a move, he said. Up into M&A strategy. You'll be shadowing directors, sitting in on all deal flows, reporting directly to me. And the title? She asked. Preston gave a small smirk. You care about titles? I care about clarity, she shot back. If this is a test, I need to know what it's measuring. Associate Director of Strategic Acquisitions, he replied. You'll have decision authority over due diligence teams, visibility on negotiations, and more eyes on you than you've ever had before. Marissa didn't blink. Good. Preston raised an eyebrow. That's it? No speech about deserving more? I'm used to earning more than I'm given, she said. This is a start. He stood. So did she. One more thing, Preston added, voice now lower. I didn't catch that clause either. Marissa's face didn't soften. That's the problem, she said. You weren't supposed to. Then she left. Back at her desk, a simple envelope was sitting beneath her monitor. No return name, no branding. Inside was a small note card. Heavy stock, typewritten letters. You're a liability. Watch yourself. She stared at it for a long time. The cameras near her section had been out for maintenance all week. She'd even flagged it in a facilities request 2 days earlier. Of course, nothing had been done. Coincidence? Maybe. But Marissa didn't believe in corporate coincidences. Not anymore. She folded the note and locked it in her drawer. Later that afternoon, the contract, now revised, was sent back to the sellers. The clause had been gutted, reworded, and replaced with strict disclosure parameters. Marissa's draft had made it in untouched. Legal, risk, compliance, all signed off. The seller pushed back. Mildly, passive-aggressively, but they signed. Because they had no choice. Because someone in their shop knew they'd tried to slide something by. And now they knew someone here caught it. That night, 6:47 p.m., Preston's assistant called again. He wanted 5 minutes. Just 5. Marissa entered to find him sitting, coffee in hand, tie loosened. A different Preston, one stripped of performance. I'm pulling you off support, he said flatly. You're mine now. M&A, real seat. You'll get the transfer paperwork tomorrow. Use my name. Marissa stayed silent, eyes trained on his. You'll be watching deals from top to bottom, participating, not observing. Understood? She nodded once. And when someone questions why you picked me? Preston leaned back. Because you saw what others didn't. I can teach process. I can't teach instinct. And you've got it. She turned to leave. Marissa? She paused. I still don't know how you spotted it. She didn't look back. I read like no one's coming to save me, she said, and walked out. That night, as the snow fell outside her apartment window, and emails stacked up by the minute, Marissa sat quietly with a mug of tea in her laptop. She didn't check LinkedIn. She didn't call her parents. She didn't celebrate. She just opened the next contract and started reading. Marissa Langford stepped onto the 35th floor like someone stepping into air that didn't belong to them. The carpet was softer. The light was warmer. The silence wasn't silence. It was money. old, polished, wood-paneled money. The nameplate on her temporary office door was made of brushed brass, slid in neatly under her new title, Marissa Langford, Associate Director, Strategic Acquisitions. It felt unreal, like borrowing someone else's seat at someone else's funeral. She opened the door, half expecting the room to vanish into a puff of elite-level gaslighting. But it didn't. The office was real, sleek, clean. A corner desk, two monitors, and a window that watched over downtown Minneapolis like a quiet god. A single folder sat waiting on the desk with a yellow sticky tab on the front. Onboarding, M&A portfolio priority. She set her bag down slowly, like she might wake something up. And maybe she did, because not 5 minutes later, someone knocked. It was Angela, legal's queen of ice. But today there was no smirk, no tight nod, just a clipboard and an unreadable expression. "You're already making people nervous," she said without hello. Marissa blinked. "That was fast." Angela stepped inside and closed the door. "You don't get promoted mid-quarter unless you're someone's hero or someone's headache." Marissa didn't reply. Angela continued. "I reviewed the clause again. You didn't just flag it, you reconstructed the risk logic." Marissa stayed quiet. She knew a setup when she heard one. Angela sat down opposite her. "You know what they're whispering?" Marissa waited. "That Preston picked you because you made him look bad, and that now he's just trying to control the narrative." That tracked. "And that this," she motioned around the office, "is a leash, not a crown." Marissa leaned back in her chair. "Then it's a leash I intend to stretch until it snaps." Angela's lips curled, just a little. "That's what I told them you'd say." Then she stood. "First fire comes tomorrow morning. Project Echo Stream. You'll be in the room." Marissa nodded. "What's the temperature?" Angela opened the door. "Boiling." 9 a.m. EcoStream Strategy Meeting. It was a different room now. Smaller than the boardroom from last week, but denser in energy. Only 7 people. All seniors. All veterans. Preston sat at the head of the table. Mark Eisen, surprise, was on the far end. Rodrigo and Brittany flanked the side closest to the whiteboard. The minute Marissa entered, Rodrigo's eyes narrowed. Brittany offered a tight nod. Mark didn't even pretend. Preston gestured. "Let's begin." Angela started the overview, laying out EchoStream, a proposed minority investment in a mid-tier AI startup focused on infrastructure optimization. Big buzzwords, moderate margins, but high potential long-term. Marissa listened, flipping pages. No red flags yet. Just the usual ambition wrapped in plausible numbers. Then she saw it. Page 18. A due diligence summary on data handling compliance. Vague. Too vague. "Has anyone verified their GDPR exposure in non-EU partnerships?" she asked. The room paused. Rodrigo looked annoyed. "Their reps claimed minimal EU crossover. It's not a top-line risk." Marissa's tone didn't change. "There's an Israeli subcontractor listed under platform integration. If they're exporting analytics functions through Tel Aviv, that could trip EU privacy thresholds." Rodrigo scoffed. "That's a stretch." Angela didn't blink. "I'll get legal on it." Preston looked at Marissa. "Good catch." Mark cleared his throat. "We've already sunk over 70 hours into this review. Are we suggesting we delay again because of what might be a hypothetical compliance risk?" "No," Marissa said. "I'm suggesting we validate the exposure before it becomes real risk. You don't build planes midair." Brittany, to her credit, nodded slightly. "She's right. If there's GDPR liability, it needs to be known before we even draft intent." Mark didn't respond, just clicked his pen harder than necessary. Preston turned to Marissa. "Prepare a risk memo for legal. Include GDPR exposure and integration chain liabilities. I want it by close of business." "Done," she replied. And just like that, she wasn't the new girl anymore. She was the one Preston listened to. 12:21 p.m. Kitchenette, 35th floor. She stirred powdered creamer into the corporate coffee sludge when Brittany appeared, this time without a wall of silence. "You really know how to piss off Mark," she said, leaning on the counter. "Occupational hazard," Marissa replied. Brittany took a breath. "He's not just angry, he's threatened." That's his problem. No, Brittany said gently. It's yours. Marissa turned. Why? Because guys like him don't lose well, and because you didn't rise through the process. I rose through reality, Marissa said. That's the only ladder I had. Brittany gave her a look. One part admiration, two parts warning. Just watch your corners. It's not the clause that gets you, it's the consequences. 5:47 p.m. Back at her desk. She submitted the memo with 10 minutes to spare. It was detailed, aggressive, and ironclad. A digital paper trail that no one could ignore. Then for the first time all day, she exhaled. In the silence, she remembered the note. You're a liability. She'd seen threats before. Microaggressions in emails, side comments during happy hours. A senior partner once told her to smile more during a 70-page compliance presentation, but this felt like something else. She locked the file in her bottom drawer again, this time wrapping it in a copy of the EchoStream binder. If they were going to dig a hole for her, she'd at least make them trip in it first. 7:12 p.m., Preston's final word. Preston sent a short reply to her memo. Memo acknowledged. Forwarded to legal, M&A, and compliance. Good work. That was it. No praise, no promises. Just recognition. She read it twice, and then smiled. Monday, 8:02 a.m. The 35th floor had its own rhythm. Not frantic like the 28th, where sales screamed over ringing phones. Not sluggish like HR on 22, but sharp. Everything up here was sharpened. Suits, words, smiles. Especially smiles. Marissa had only been in her new office for a week, but the air already smelled different. Less like coffee, more like strategy and cologne. She had started waking up 40 minutes earlier, checking her inbox while brushing her teeth, and keeping a notepad in the shower. This was no longer about survival. This was endurance. And this morning she was enduring a digital ambush. 12 emails, each of them CC'd, each of them regarding the same issue, a procurement oversight in EchoStream's vendor pipeline, a clause she hadn't flagged, a clause now being questioned by legal in Tel Aviv. Did you miss this? Came the short message from Rodrigo. Angela's was more diplomatic. Need your eyes on clause 4.7, could trigger foreign liability. And Preston's? No subject line, just 3 words. Is this yours? Marissa stared at the screen. Her stomach tightened. She opened the document again. Clause 4.7, a logistics transfer stipulation with automatic escalation if a third-party partner failed to deliver within a window. The clause seemed benign before, but now, combined with the new data-sharing agreement, it looked like a time bomb. She didn't panic. She printed it, highlighted it, mapped the contractual dependencies, but her throat was dry. She hadn't caught it. 9:30 a.m. Crisis table. The war room felt different when you were the one under the microscope. Let me be clear, Mark Eisen started, tapping a printout with theatrical disdain. This clause was in the addendum provided on March 3rd. It was your memo that fast-tracked the approval, and now the seller is citing this language to limit their obligations. Preston remained silent. Angela was reviewing another printout. Rodrigo just looked smug. I wasn't the only one who reviewed it, Marissa said firmly. Mark raised his eyebrows. But you were the one who told legal we could proceed. I said to proceed after compliance cleared the platform, she replied. They did. Their clearance covered data integrations, not procurement timing clauses, which we now know impacts the schedule and increases our exposure by over $2.3 million, Mark pressed. It's not about the number, Brittany cut in suddenly. It's about accountability. Did the clause change between draft 4 and 5? Angela flipped pages. Number it was always there. Mark leaned back. Then maybe the new girl isn't as sharp as we thought. Preston looked up. Enough, he said quietly, but with a weight that made the room still. Marissa didn't respond. She didn't flinch, but she could feel something new burrowing under her skin. Self-doubt. Not because she was wrong, but because she didn't catch it in time. And in this building, that could be enough. Later that day, 1:17 p.m., the burnt Angela knocked on her door. She didn't come in. You all right? Marissa nodded, but her eyes stayed on the screen. Her notes, her mistake. It's not a fatal hit, Angela said. Doesn't have to be, Marissa replied. All it takes is enough people whispering the same thing. Angela hesitated, then added, I've seen guys bounce back from worse. You will too. You just don't get the same runway. I never did, Marissa said softly. Angela left. Marissa stared at the note on her desk. She'd found it this morning tucked inside a binder. One clause doesn't make you a genius. Don't forget that. No name, no handwriting, no proof. But she didn't need proof to know how hate worked, especially when it wore suits. Tuesday, 7:42 a.m., the turnet came faster than expected. Angela pinged her at 7:42 with a single line. Echo Stream Clause 4.7 update. Look now. She clicked. The clause, the one that had triggered so much backlash, was part of a template draft. Not EchoStream's own language. It had been pasted in error by the external counsel's paralegal team, a holdover from a supply chain deal in Poland. EchoStream's executives had flagged it late, but hadn't wanted to delay closing. They'd hoped no one would notice. Marissa had walked into fire for a clause someone else meant to delete. Preston called 5 minutes later. You were right, not your miss. Marissa didn't say, I told you so. She didn't need to. What she said was, do you want to write up or do you want to fix? Preston replied, both. Wednesday, 5:55 p.m., full circle. The fix was ugly. It meant renegotiation. It meant confronting the other side with proof of sloppiness. It meant friction. And Marissa led every meeting. Not Angela, not Mark. Marissa. She walked them through the clause origin, the control process failure, and a revised escrow clause that covered delay liability for 90 days. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't flinch. When the Zoom meeting ended, Brittany looked at her with a small nod. One that didn't say, good job, but something better. You survived. 2 months later. The office now felt different, not because the walls had changed, they hadn't, but because of how people moved around her. No more averted gazes, no more passive smirks. They didn't love her. They feared what she might catch next, but fear wasn't what she was after. Marissa had spent the last 8 weeks rebuilding processes from the inside. Every clause, every review funnel, every deal now passed through a playbook she helped create. They didn't ask her. She just did it, quietly, relentlessly. And Preston? He stopped calling her sharp. He started calling her essential. But power didn't change her. It clarified her. Tuesday, 11:03 a.m., emergency meeting.